I've worked as a hospice nurse for over 20 years. A patient dies almost every day. I'm used to it and have learned not to become overly attached. Of course, I feel for them and their families. My job is to make their final days as pleasant as possible. Sometimes, just before they die, patients share their darkest secrets with me, and beg me not to tell anyone. So I have kept my word, mostly because I don't bother remembering. The patients would tell about minor crimes they had committed, life-changing decisions they had made, and about their children born from extramarital relationships. But one elderly patient shared something so disgusting. What he revealed was too terrifying to be forgotten. I have never been the same. George was nearly 95 years old and had lung cancer. I was surprised that no one, ever, paid him a visit and that he never requested a phone call. George rarely spoke and often appeared to be lost in his thoughts. He was going to die at any moment. So, after giving him medication one evening, I asked if he had any relatives or friends we could call. He shook his head, looked at me, and motioned to me to take a seat next to his bed.
I have something to get off my chest.
George told me he was married, but that his wife had died many years ago. He was father to 2 children and a grandfather to 7 grandchildren. I reasoned that they must have a strained relationship with him. But George quickly revealed why. No living family member cared about him.
My wife was a quiet, submissive woman. She always did what I asked and never complained. My sons were good children. They left after graduating high school and I have never seen them again.
I sat quietly and listened. I'd heard my dying patients complain about being terrible parents or spouses. In actuality, they really were not. People sometimes have regrets, or wish they had done things differently in their lives. I let him go on.
If you ask anyone who knows me, they will tell you what a great neighbor or employee I was. I was nice to everyone except my family. I was a gentleman in public. But behind closed doors I was just an absolute monster. All my life I had this uncontrollable anger that would be triggered by the littlest of things. Sometimes, it was someone else who irritated me, but my family was the one paying the price.
I listened, but started feeling uncomfortable.
I often beat my wife. She would black out from the beatings at times. I didn't just use my fists and feet either. I'd beat her with whatever I could get my hands on. The torture did not stop there. I also raped her. She was so terrified of me that she would shake when I was near her. Both my sons were products of rape.
I was completely disgusted by what I was hearing. I stood up to leave, but he grabbed my arm and forced me back into the chair. His expression was solemn and authoritative. I stayed and listened, though reluctantly. He went on.
My wife became pregnant a few more times. One child died while still in infancy. I was relieved because I didn't really want any more children. The last time she became pregnant, I locked her in the basement and told everyone that she was away to care for her sick mother. My wife actually had no other family. She was abandoned when she was a baby, and has never had a stable family.
He paused briefly, then continued.
I did all kinds of things to make her abort. I beat her, forced her to drink alcohol and certain teas. She eventually gave birth to 2 dead girls. I burned their bodies in sulfuric acid so that they could never be found. My wife had a nervous breakdown not long after. Her symptoms were too much for me to bear, so I forced her to commit suicide. No one suspected me.
I swallowed hard. Rage was growing inside me. I was tempted to snap his neck. But I sat motionless. The monster carried on with his long overdue confession.
My children were absolutely terrified of me. If they misbehaved, I used all kinds of punishments, ranging from physical abuse to forcing them to do horrible things. When one of my sons attempted to call the cops on me, I beat him and forced him to kill his pet dog. Then, I made him eat the dead dog's flesh.
I was so shocked and horrified. His expression was emotionless. He just stared at me. I stumbled out of the room. I felt upset, disgusted and angry that this monster had lived this long. Then, I came up with an idea. Couple of nights later, I decided to make him pay for what he did. It was a quiet work night. I pretended to need to check on George around 11 o'clock. He was sound asleep in his bed. Quickly, I stuffed his mouth with dirty socks and duct taped it. George was startled. Because I am overweight, I could easily put enough strain on his frail body. I then injected him with a paralyzing agent. I tied him tightly so he wouldn't move. Then, I sat back and watched. His eyes were filled with fear. He was trying to speak, but no sound came out of him loud enough for anyone to hear, except me. He soon began convulsing. I noticed his backbone arching and his muscles tensing. He broke out in cold sweat, and I knew he was terrified. I hoped that the Grim Reaper would take him to the deepest fiery pit of hell. He died after a while. I cleaned up the mess and made sure George looked like he died in his sleep. Nobody had any suspicions. There was no autopsy. I did something that someone should have done long ago. This was my first time helping justice be served, but not the last.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell button so that you don't miss any of our stories.